Your emotionally immature parents are never going to grow up and become the parents that you needed them to be. No matter how much you try to convince them that you are indeed worthy of a loving parent, that you are indeed worthy of their love, of their kindness, and their empathy. So maybe the path to take here is not to continue on trying to get them to love you and see you and validate you. Maybe this is your cue to finally move on. I know that you just want a peaceful relationship with your mom or your dad, and maybe you want them to finally understand how much they've hurt you. You want to feel seen, you want to feel validated, you want to be able to be sort of around them, but set boundaries and them respecting them, right? To have that thing that you envision where you can just exist around your parents without feeling threatened to be yourself. But if you're a child of narcissistic and emotionally immature parents, I'm sure you've tried all of that. And all of your desires to achieve all of that are so natural because a child wants closeness with their parents no matter how old we get. But you will have seen that none of these things seem to work. And you just have to try more and more to help them be someone they're not. And in the meantime, all you're doing is tolerate them more and more to, continue as they continue to be who they've always been. So you've been trying to stop them from hurting you. You want to get them to see you, to value you, to understand you, to validate you, to finally show you empathy and kindness and unconditional love. All of these things that you deserve. And you're almost coming to this as, feeling like I'm owed this. I'm expecting this. I should have gotten this. And you should have, right? A child comes into this world. I don't think we come thinking we're not going to be taken care of. It's almost like, goes without saying, we cry and people are supposed to come to our rescue and feed us and change us and help us and love us. So we develop that expectation that those who are the bigger people in our lives will always be there for us, take care of us, give us love. So it feels like you think, they owe me this. I need this. I deserve this. But this debt, they don't seem like they're wanting to pay it for it because as far as they're concerned, there's absolutely nothing wrong with how they did things. And you're possibly ungrateful, or you're too much on this TikTok app, or your therapist is putting you up to this. And if anyone owes anything to someone, that is probably you. You owe them your life and endless loyalty, which of course keeps them keeps them safe from ever being held accountable for anything that they did because they are your parents. So you try to get those people to see you and you get gaslit over and over and over again. But maybe there's one thing that you haven't tried, and that's probably the one thing that you are not really willing to try. You don't want to do it. And that is to move on from your parents and your childhood, from their grip, right? From this trauma bond that they put you in, and to mourn. Mourn the parents that you had, the parents that you never had, and the parents that you wish that they would somehow become should you have tried hard enough. Mourn basically that your childhood is over and those are the parents that you got during that childhood, and that's unchanging no matter how much you try to get them to change now. Many adult children of emotionally immature parents have been seeking therapy, right? We're reading books, you're learning, you guys are on here listening to all of us talk to you about trauma. You've been growing, all in the hopes to overcome what seems to be the challenges that you have in your life, which can be, a lot of it can be boiled down to parental abuse, right? A lot of you are actually trying to heal from parental abuse, and more specifically, narcissistic parental abuse. But within the overcoming, so many of you guys are being sold this thing that the epitome of healing, of your healing process, is to manage to finally have a good and healthy relationship with your parents. As if you getting healthy essentially means you are going to be able to tolerate abuse, which is the exact opposite, because the more healthy you get, the less you can tolerate. But there seems to be a confusion, and we're kind of telling people, which is very aligned with other things that we tell people, that they then grow enough, and now that they've grown, they have to forgive. So you do all your healing work, you mourn for years and years the past that you had, the experience of your childhood that was so bad that now has you emotionally crippled. And the end ceremony of all that is you and your parents walking off to the sunset and living happily ever after everything they've done. Because now you've grown enough to forgive them. All the while, they just remain unchanged. But nobody says anything about that except they say, oh, they're old. That's how parents are. They did the best they could. They're exempt from consequences. And you're not even allowed to experience the anger that you feel, the righteous anger that you feel. And you become afraid of that anger. You feel guilty of that anger. And then you possibly redirect that anger to yourself or other people in your life, but never where it's really due. That's the tricky part about forgiveness. We tell people to forgive when they're actually not even ready or willing, or that is nowhere near where they should be going in their direction of healing. And what they do with all of that anger that we force them to intellectualize and to kind of like form into this beautiful, spiritual, nice story that you are suddenly the bigger person out of all of the adults that were born before you and raised you. So you're technically not the bigger person. But you're being told, you are intellectualizing the beautiful concept of you are able to forgive them, which essentially is a code for saying don't hold those who hurt you accountable, and just tolerate them because of who they are in your life, right? The role that they have in your life has determined how much you will tolerate from them. And theoretically, it should be, different. We should be thinking about this the other way around. The more important the role someone has in our lives, the less we tolerate from them, because we supposedly have expectations, right? When you're walking down the streets, you don't have an expectation from a random person to be kind to you, although normally we should, but you know what I mean? Like if somebody's rude to you, you're not gonna be like, you were disappointed me, whatever. Some random person was unkind to you, but your parent, that's where we birth some expectations, which apparently we're not supposed to have anymore, as we should forgive. And that's deeper than just, some spiritual kind of like, oh, forgive your parents. It's really aligned with how the nuclear family dynamic is allowed to continue to perpetuate abuse to the young and actually protects the old. The hierarchy of that family system is not there to support the vulnerable, but it's actually there to give full permission to the ones that are more powerful to overpower the less powerful ones. And then have them program them to being obedient because of how much they've been abused. So the young in these family systems remain in debt and loyalty no matter how much they're treated, and the old remain sanctified, respected and feared because parents. So these parents, these narcissistic and toxic parents that we tend to talk about, and these are the types of parents that you're all trying to heal from. And by the way, when we say narcissistic, we don't mean diagnosable, but those who are exhibiting narcissistic traits, which to an extent all of us do, but obviously not to the extent that you've experienced your parents do to you. So they are very authoritarian and oppressive and toxic, and they sort of uphold patriarchal values because it's the same model, right? It's the same model that is very centered around the well-being of the most powerful one in the group. The emotional well-being, their needs are met, their moods are managed. Everybody's just afraid of one person, and everybody else's needs are second to that person. So that kind of teaches us, right? We're coming out of these childhoods already feeling in debt for our lives, and very, very obedient to authority, and very fearful of those in authority. Of course, why not? We've seen what people in power can do to us. And so it feels like the parents in these families, in the nuclear families, are like literal micro gods. It's like a version of gods, authoritarian, oppressive, narcissistic, punishing, that we owe our lives to because, yeah, that's it. We owe them adoration and whatever, right? So you could almost think that the god that they created was in their image. It's just they made him a little bit more scary. And of course, a man. But luckily, as the conversation about trauma is sort of opening up and we are all hearing about it and our consciousness evolves, we are beginning to see the loopholes here. These totalities, these generalizations, these rules that we've been given no longer apply, especially when we're trying to heal. Because healing means individuating, becoming our own person, setting boundaries, choosing ourselves, knowing that we're worthy. And all of these things do not align with what we've been told we're supposed to be doing. Tolerating abuse, blind obedience, loyalty, enmeshment, no boundaries, don't make decisions for our lives, let others do that for us, and be owned, essentially, for our entire lives, right? So as we grow, we will all eventually come to this crossroads, this difficult choice between ourselves and our parents, because remaining loyal to both is going to end up being impossible, especially since emotionally immature and toxic and entitled parents accept self-sacrifice. You laying down your entire life trying to repay them this gift that they gave you, the most expensive gift anyone could ever give you, which doesn't really sound like a gift if they want you to pay back like that. But then if you don't, you're ungrateful, you're a bad child. You should be ashamed of yourself. And how dare you? You're possibly a disappointment to the family. Now, all of what we are trying to do with this sort of like healing revolution isn't just so that we can create happy lives. Oh, I'm going to heal, and I'm going to heal, and I'm going to be a happy person. But more so, I'm going to heal, and I'm going to be free from oppression, from internal oppression. And we've all been oppressed in this household. Our authenticity has been oppressed, our self-expression, our thoughts, our experiences as whoever we wanted to be, our permission to just exist and discover who we are. We've been put into boxes, told who we should be. We had to serve in a way that felt, it wasn't really a choice, right? It didn't happen in a nice and nurturing environment where we were guided by people who we just loved and respected. It happened by people who used their authority to fearmonger us, right? To punish us, to condition us, to train us to be a certain way, which firstly serves them in that microcosm of the family, the oppressive family, and then serves the entire world, because we're already getting out of our childhoods feeling pretty, we're pretty trained on how to exist in toxic environments, being expected to fulfill gender roles, being expected to be perfect, overworking, trying hard to prove our worth. So we're already pretty well sort of adapted to go into a very toxic world that doesn't want us to be who we are. It just needs another person to continue on doing what everybody else is doing so that the world keeps spinning. But that's the thing, when we start healing, eventually, and every actually oppressive system ends up collapsing on its face when those who have been oppressed finally wake up. And in this instance, these oppressive households that we talk about lose their power over us when we heal. But it's not because we're becoming smarter only as we heal and we're understanding all the things that I mentioned before, but it's because we are learning the one thing that was gate kept from us, that wasn't really affirmed to us, that wasn't really planted in us. Like they planted all of this toxicity, all of those horrible phrases that you've all heard the same, nobody's ever going to love you, you're worthless, I regret having you, and all of the other horrible stuff that we can deduct to a list of like 10 favorite things that they say. And across the world, that list sort of like checks, right? Everybody has heard similar things from their parents, almost like they've all been studying the same thing. And you can write in the comments which one is your parents' favorite thing to say, because you will see how common that phrase was. But anyway, they've instilled all of those things with a lot of ease as they kept repeating them over and over again, but they never taught you the one thing that you needed to learn. And that is that you're absolutely and indisputably worthy. Of course, if you had known that you're worthy, you wouldn't be trying to earn your worth. And if you don't try to earn your worth, how are you going to obey someone who wants you to be running around trying to earn their validation? Right? It doesn't check like that, right? So that learning our worth really is the most empowering thing that we do, because that will naturally emerge this inner power in us to set boundaries, to create distance, to say no, and to finally choose ourselves. Because when we actually experience the fact that we are worthy of better things, we will no longer tolerate being treated like that. And we're not just not going to tolerate it from random people on the street or in the workplace or in romantic relationships, but we will not tolerate it from those who forced us to tolerate it because we were vulnerable in their hands. And those are our parents. So we will kind of like shatter the bars of this cage that we were locked in since children. And we never thought there's a path out for us. And then we just been living our lives through that cage, really. Just we change maybe scenes and different people, but we're still trapped. We're still trapped in the oppressive thought process and beliefs that were instilled in us that do not empower us to live a life that aligns with our power. It just gives us the opportunity to live very small lives, most of which we dedicate to our parents in one way or the next. And a lot of you are sort of like devoting a lot of that energy to making them feel better, right? So it's almost like their emotional world became your responsibility, and you spend most of your life trying to kind of get them to be kind and loving to you and happy within themselves. So, you have something great happening to you, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to call them. And I'm sure most of you know that if you call a narcissistic and emotionally immature parent to tell them good news, they're going to rip you apart, and they will visibly not be happy for you. And that will break your little heart in so many pieces, no matter how old you are. Because that's the thirst here. That's the need. That's finally like, I want to share my good news with you. Why aren't you happy for me? And it's really painful to see that not only they're not happy, a lot of them are possibly also very jealous and threatened and will tear you down. So we have to stop playing this game of how much more can I try to get love or feeling worthy. And we have to resign from trying to earn our worth from these people. And that is what will set us free. And I'm not telling you necessarily cut contact, don't ever talk to them, change country, blah, blah. It's not really as simple as that, although I'm not going to lie, not being in touch with them will relieve you from at least having to deal with them in the external world. But of course, that's not going to make them go away from here, from the internal world, which is why the real work is to do our healing work. And all of this oppression that we hold within is stored in our subconscious mind through memories, through beliefs, through the experiences we had in our childhood that created us, right? That created who we became in order to survive, and created all these defense mechanisms that we operate through, and created all these stories that we were planted in, or we concluded based on what was happening to us. And now our lives, it's almost like we've pre-decided our entire lives, or our entire lives have been pre-decided since we were 7. Which is why I'll never stop saying that no matter how painful it is, we have to revisit our past. And I'm the first to say that if we didn't have to, I would never be talking about trauma or the past anymore. I have to tell you that I really love what I do, and I love working with people. But there's days that I'm like, I'm so tired of trauma being the first conversation that we're always having. Because it's painful to constantly have to see people, in pain for what had happened to them so many years ago and how much it impacted their lives. It's really heartbreaking. And with that in mind is why I created a hypnotic program that sort of like tackles the most important wounds that happen in childhood to help you unburden your system and to finally get free. And there's 2 things I want to mention about the program, which I made with a lot of love. And these are stops that I've had to take in my own journey, is that this is not an easy journey, right? Some of these sessions are really uplifting and empowering, but a lot of them are painful because you're being reminded of things. But there's so much wisdom in our inner system that when we unlift the veil and when we uncover these memories, these painful memories, and when we actually feel those emotions that have been stored and keeping us in survival for years, then we open up, and there's so much space that opens up in our lives because now we're not holding on to that anymore. So that journey is a challenging journey, and I've made it so I'm there with you, right? I talk to you, I answer back to your prompts. You hear my voice all the time. I'm there with the hypnotic sessions. I give you nightly sessions to listen to. I do all of it, but I can't live and feel the pain for you. So that's essentially the bravery. And even if you don't do it through my program and you decide, I'm going to do inner child work or go to therapy, know that it's going to get bad or challenging before it gets good. Because there's a lot of pain. You're holding a lot of pain within. You're holding a lot of grief, unaddressed grief. And all of this denial and all of this suppression and all of this sort of disconnection from your experience. Once you start catching up with it, it's not going to be easy. But the other side is absolutely worth doing this trip. But what is very important through these journeys, right, and also what I did in my own sort of work and what was the focus of my own work, was that through this painful journey, I guide you to finally reclaim your sense of worth, which essentially is actually the conclusive hypnotic journey is one where you reclaim not only your worth, your generational worth, right? I'm really trying to include everything here. But what I want you to understand, the whole journey of doing this isn't just, oh, I'm just going to cry about my trauma and I'm going to feel sad and then I'm going to be fine. No, I will get in touch with myself. I will develop empathy for myself. I will learn how to reparent myself. And then I will, through all of this, what will emerge in me is this real feeling, finally feeling it for real this time, that I'm actually worthy. And from that space, life will have to change. Relationships will have to change. Everything will have to change. So I want you to be aware that if you are to go through a journey like that, either by choosing heal, which I totally recommend, of course, because I made it based on my own standards of what I think people should be addressing when they're trying to do healing work. Because a lot of you are being taught, set boundaries, say this, say the other, but the real work has to happen in the subconscious mind. That's where the real change happens, because we hit it to the core and then our system will adapt to the new information that will emerge through such soul cathartic sessions, right? But the thing is that I want you to know that this healing journey is difficult. And I want to tell you something, that if you've survived your childhood, which was pretty abusive, emotionally for sure, a lot of you also physically, but it was brutal, right? There's things that if you were to tell them to people, they'd be like shocked on what you went through when you were so young. So I have big faith that if we've been able to go through so much abuse with the little resources that we had when we were kids, just a bunch of defense mechanisms, that now that we are adults and we have all these tools, right, like my program or anything else, or therapy or books, so many beautiful books that are helping us in our journey, we can go through that pain. We're fine. We could do it. If we manage then to somehow live through it and figure out ways to survive it, we will do so now. And that is what actually helps us individuate, because we're willing to grow into a person who is no longer running away from the childhood fears and pains and traumas, right? It's going back to the past and recollecting pieces of their soul, bringing them back, and then living your life as an adult. And through this process, because we reparent ourselves, we are no longer going to be so fixated on being parented. And now that we know we're worthy, we don't need them to tell us we're worthy. Now that we validated our story through our own inner child work and we've seen what happened, we don't need anybody to validate it for us, right? So you see how it kind of liberates us in so many ways when we truly and fully see the truth that we've been holding within has so much power to change us that no amount of mindset can shift you out of it, right? So my idea with this video was to tell you that if you're still trying every possible thing that you can to get your emotionally mature and narcissistic parents to, to be kinder to you, to be nicer to you, so you keep sort of explaining your boundaries, you try to talk to them in ways where they don't get triggered, you share your life with them, you're trying to bring them close, and you're doing all these things, I'm going to gently invite you to consider that maybe you should stop doing that already. And maybe there's something else that you have to try. And that's the thing that, as I said before, you don't really want to try, but That's to accept that your childhood is over. And that will happen when you dedicate the energy that you've been dedicating to the relationship with them, to the relationship with yourself, with your specifically younger self, with your past, right? You can't be running away from that and chasing them to love you as if you're still 5, 6, 7, 12, because they won't. And you will be begging for it your entire life. And it's a shame because you've had to beg for it for so much of your life because you had no other access to it. But now you have, and that access is in you. You just need to awaken it. So, whatever it is that you end up doing with your healing work, I want you to know that the direction that you have to be taking is accepting. And you're not going to be judged or qualified as more healed because you have a good relationship with those who abused you. As I said before, if anything, it's possibly the opposite. The more you heal, the less you will tolerate, not out of reactivity, but out of finally, giving yourself permission to exist in environments that aren't so painful, to not live in these emotional war zones all the time and trying to create intimacy when there's hostility. And there has been hostility forever, right? There has been a predictability, hostility, abuse. I hope you know that all of what we do, although we have to talk about parents, is not really about parents, right? We just have to talk about them so that we get you to remember you. But it is about finally you stopping to be chosen, right? To be seen, to be loved, and accepted by those who never actually loved you. And when you do that for your parents, actually you're going to stop doing it for everybody, because that compulsion is what drives everything else that you've been trying to do your entire life. I'm pretty sure you've been chasing emotionally unavailable people for most of your life. And that's not because I can see the future or I can see who you are. I'm only looking at a camera lens right now. But if we were raised in environments that are not giving us consistent and rich and affirming love, then we get used to that. We get used to being breadcrumbed. And so somebody loves us, shows us this much, and we take it, and we make some things out of nothings. And we choose unavailable people, we tolerate breadcrumbs, or we entertain fantasies, and we turn them into entire happy ever after scenarios. We fall in limerence. We do all these things, all because the root and the compulsion is to get the love that we were never given and were owed. But I'm going to end this video with one thing that I want you to take away. The love that you're trying to seek from these unavailable parents and these unavailable partners as a consequence is the love that you've not been able to experience for yourself because you've never been taught how to love yourself through how you were treated. It would never be a natural response to existence. You were just mirroring the way you've been loved. So this brings us also that you probably treat yourself pretty much the way your parents treated you, which is why, again, we have to heal. We have to heal from the abuse, from how we feel about ourselves because of the abuse, from what we believe about ourselves because of the abuse, and because of how we treat ourselves because of that abuse. And sometimes this starts with distancing ourselves from those who inflicted it on us, right, and continue to reinforce it. But the actual work happens with ourselves and with our subconscious mind that held on all of this abuse and oppression and turn it into a way of experiencing our own selves. So it's time to come home, not to them or anybody, or find your home in someone else's heart, to you. I'll see you soon.